I just wanted to know, being from the government, more or less, some are direct, some are a bit as part of the subsidy of the government. What's your view on the importance of sustainable growth? Maybe when you can start first.
Okay. Thanks, Aizat. Well, sustainable growth and development, right? From my point of view, sustainability, when you talk about sustainability, it's not about maintaining or being able to maintain doing the same things year in, year out, while not polluting the environment. Essentially, it's a lot more than that. So how I would define sustainability is how we ensure the long-term survivability and growth of the business and the environment that the business operates in. So that's how I would define sustainability. And like you mentioned earlier, the world continues to evolve. I mean, we've been through, the industrial age, the world wars, and more recently, the COVID. How do we ensure the sustainability or the continued growth of a business through all that? So the key in that is actually innovation. So we recognize this, that innovation is key to ensuring the long-term sustainability of the business to, in our case for Cradle, that we look into startups of Malaysia, right? So for us, we see it as a very, that it's important for us to really recognize this here and now, and the demands from the market for sustainable solutions and sustainable businesses, from the investor's point of view, is here. So we have to do something about it. And from Cradle, us doing this event today is that first step in creating the awareness among the startup ecosystem about the importance of sustainable growth and development among the startups. So, yeah.
Thank you, sir. How about you, Prof. Jan? What's your thoughts on the government's role in the importance of sustainable growth?
Thank you very much. I hope people can hear me. To me, when I look at sustainability, and I think you've very well mentioned what it is all about. But I look at global market, because when I look at digital technology, it's not local, it's global. And I always try and see what other countries have done and how they have done it, and done it in a very sustainable way. And when I look at innovation, as was mentioned, because this is the engine for growth, I look at Israel. It's about 9 million people, and it has got the highest number of startups per capita. And what made it happen was the R&D ecosystem. If you look at the research and development centers, there were the highest number of research and development centers in a very small country. Because there's a feeder to innovation, there's a feeder to productivity, there's a feeder to basically being a sustainable nation. And so when we are developing our own policies and strategies in Sarawak, as you know, the Sarawak was launched the post-COVID development strategy, and now we are in the final stage of rolling out our Digital Recovery 2030 blueprint. We're looking into what the countries have done well and how we could bring them into our ecosystem. And in PCDS, this is basically what we did. We looked at to make sure that our developments, our progress, our economic growth is sustainable. We looked at the policies that is needed to support a ecosystem development. In particular, the infrastructure, the human capital, the IP policies, the server maturity, the data centers, and so on and so forth. And at the same time, we started looking at how we make sure that our growth is inclusive. Because when we talk of sustainability, we have to make sure there's a fair wealth distribution, so that everybody in the community benefits from that development. So we have got a number of policies that has looked into social divide and socio-economic developments, and we have implemented that basically in making sure that our people benefit from that. So basically our mantra is leading digital economy and society, not only economy, but the society as a whole. Anyway.
Chief Sudarnoto, anything to add on that?
Yeah, said a lot. So I don't have to say anything about it. But I think yes, sustainability is very important when it comes to business itself. People always talk about, people always equate sustainability to environment. But sustainability is all about sustaining your life. That's my opinion. You know, I mean, end of the day, what sustaining your life nowadays is all about what revenue you make, whether you can bring food on the table or not. Now, this is other thing that is very, very important. So all these things that's impacting our way of we things is changing from time to time. Climate will make changes to how we think, how we do now, right? Not only that, the technology that is available at the moment is also changing. So all these things, how do you want to keep abreast of all these changes at the same time adapting to it and sustain your lifestyle? That is very important. That is my view of sustainability. And of course, when it comes to the government, we do a lot of things. As I told Prof Jack just now, sustainability, when you talk about implementing digital economy for that matter, we want to sustain the digital economy. We do not want, at the end of the day, when we implement digital economy, we're going to create a gap between the urban and rural, right? Because of basic things like connectivity is not there. So we have to ensure that, you know, all these things like the exclusivity must be there to sustain the long run of the digital economy itself, you know. So that's just one of the things that I felt that when it comes to sustainability, yes, it's very important, and the government is all its best to make sure that whatever we do, it must be sustainable way forward as well.
Can I just add one more point when we talk of sustainability? When I look at Malaysia and Sarawak, in this part of the world, I see that our economy is mostly driven by the public sector. And if it's a public sector driving the economy or development, it's not sustainable at all. You look at the developed nations, it's the private sector that runs the economy. It's the public sector that makes sure the policies are competitive, the human capital, the resources, the infrastructure, all those things are there. But if you expect the public sector to be funding everything and running the economy, it's not sustainable. So I think we have to move from a public sector-driven economy to a private sector-driven economy to be more sustainable.
So building upon that, Prof. Jack, so the policies that the government are currently looking at to encourage more investment by private sectors, especially those from overseas.
I think when we talk of private sector economy, that's the number one investment. And when I look around, I see a number of companies around here, real investors are very small. And when I look at the technology investment, it's not a brick and mortar investment, it's not a manufacturing investment, it's a high-tech investment. What they look for is it a stable government? They look for what are the IP policies or copyright policies. They look for because it's digital, it's technology, is the country or the state Sabah mature? Because we are all operating in a Sabah environment. What is our business development policies? What is our research and innovation policies? Are we supporting those people? Because that's what technology is all about. And the other fairly important area is, is it inclusive? Are we taking care of everybody? And everybody got talent. Yeah. So policies in the direction got to be very important together with the infrastructure. So I think when people look at investment, these are some of the areas they're looking to. And I'm proud to say that in Sarawak, in our post-COVID development strategy, also in our the 2030 digital blueprint, we have put a lot of emphasis on growing our private sector economy. So there are policies and regulations put in place that is very conducive for the private sector to come and invest. And we are seeing this sort of investment growing now. Data centers are coming in. Infrastructure people are coming in. Service providers are coming in. Because that's what we need to grow. They are like a magnet. If they come in, the ecosystem will grow around it. Sometimes I try and draw an analogy like Toyota, a car manufacturer. Toyota does not manufacture parts. They only assemble. but the ecosystem they've created around them is the people develop performance. It's just amazing. So I think this the more we have to create that when investors come in and give the opportunity to the private sector, they know how to do business. The government knows how to use money. They know how to generate money. But to be very perfect. Thank you.
Sorry, just to add on, I think we had a side conversation before this. Just to add on to what Prof. Jai was saying, there's been a lot of talk about comparing the Malaysian ecosystem with the ones in the Western countries, right? So it's like, how do we make it the same as it is in the US or in Europe? But then again, I think the question here also I will ask this question as well. It's not just the startup ecosystem over there, but it is also the surrounding ecosystem that surrounds the startup ecosystem over there that actually works together in hand, that creates to what it is today. So the policies that is important, we don't have to look just at the policies for the startup ecosystem, but also the policies surrounding the whole country's ecosystem, be it banking, financing, health, education. All that plays a role into actually developing the Malaysian startup ecosystem.
Just now, the words for inclusiveness was mentioned a lot. So, seems like inclusivity plays an important role in, I think, a good ecosystem. So, I just wanted to know, as the government, how can government ensure sustainable growth and development are inclusive and benefit all members of the society? I think Encik Sudarnoto ada mention just whilst we undertake this part, the care there's a lot widening between the population from the rural and urban areas. So I just wanted to know from how do we ensure that that it's inclusive? Encik Sudarnoto?
Yeah, basically, how do we know that it's inclusive? If everybody is happy, we know that it's inclusive, right? If everybody is not happy, then we know that we are not doing a good job. I think that's the key indicator. But I think the most important thing is we have to make sure that whatever efforts that we put in, we must cover both the what I call demographic, or the urban people, and also the rural people. As far as Sarawak context is concerned, because Sarawak is so big, landmass. And then we basically have what we call infrastructure that is not well built as compared to what in the West Malaysia. So I think when you talk about inclusivity, one of the key areas when you talk about digital economy is nothing more than, first and foremost, it must be access to connectivity. That's number one. And apart from that as well, how do we want to discover the gem in all these rural places? So that's why the Sarawak government ecosystem, the Sarawak digital ecosystem, we focus a lot on innovation hub, building innovation hub in areas like Kapit, in areas like Lawas. If you go to these places, it's as good as digital village. Don't be surprised. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to encourage people to go to these kind of places and start to break teach, and to be more innovative with this kind of providing the conducive environment for them to work and to innovate. So these are one of the few things that the government is doing. Of course, the telecommunication improvement, right? This is definitely government is spending a lot of money. Not only just we depend on federal government, but we also inject. The Sarawak government also do intervention project to ensure that we achieve the internet penetration as high as possible by 2025. That's the target. Because after 2025, our focus is a lot on infrastructure, bringing in to reach the gap between urban and rural as well. So not only that as well, we have to make sure that reach people as well, so that they know what is available is there for them to participate in this policy. So all these things has to come together. And then we also focus on students from primary school as well, the STEM programs, because as rightly mentioned by Prof. Jai, we need to make sure that we are involved in more deep technology will evolve as well. So we need students who are the real interest of students in STEM program, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So all these things is very important to us, So we must develop our young from primary school all the way to tertiary studies. So these are the things that the state government is doing, the initiative the government is doing at home to ensure what they call inclusivity when it comes to the school content.
Prof. Jack, would like to add to that?
I think my friend Matthieu has covered quite a lot, but what I will add is coming for the policy. And when we look at inclusivity, we have to make sure that when we write policies, it has to be developed together with the community and the private sector. It can't be done in isolation that government develops a policy and says it's what it is. So it's a co-creation of the policies, very important. And so Northrop did mention about the innovation hubs. And through our policy development that started in 2018, now we've got 22 innovation hubs throughout Sarawak. About 12 of them are government funded, and the other 10 are corporation funded. Not only that, we've converted a number of the libraries into digital community centers, because to be inclusive, give opportunity to everybody, right from the people in the rural areas, we need this access to technology and access to computers and access to facilities for them, plus awareness programs, training programs. So I think we are, because of our visionary leadership of our government, they've done all that. But I think an important thing to understand is that you can't do policy development or implementation in silos. We have to bring the community together, private sector, and co-create co-generate policies.
And just wanted to build upon what Prof. Jack mentioned just now, awareness, and also going to the ground and talking to the stakeholders that we are doing right now. So, how does that relate to? From your point, how does that relate to policy making? How important is that?
See, that's the thing. When we the way people look at government sometimes, right? Like people over there, they're very top. They don't really talk to the people down there, right? Because that's where it becomes a disconnect. So when it comes to policy making or even coming up with initiatives or projects, stuff like that, it's very important for us to engage the stakeholders, the people that we are impacting. Because at the end of the day, it's them that we are serving, it's for the benefit of the people and the country. So sessions like this is actually very, very important for us to be able to hear and interact with the actual stakeholders that we are serving, to know that are we doing the right thing? Should we do something differently? Is there anything else that we need to do? So that in comes that the inclusive nature of the co-creation of the policies and initiatives that we should have, with.
Okay. So I think we've covered our sustainability and inclusiveness. I think we would like to move on to the topic of economic stability and competitiveness. Maybe I'll go back to Encik Norman again. Innovation. How can it be leveraged to support economic stability and competitiveness?
I think I mentioned in my opening just now that innovation be key to maintaining that edge in an ever-changing world. So innovation typically drives two things. Either it increases productivity or it increases your competitiveness. But here actually, I would like to give a special focus to actually the potential of startups being the engine of innovation for the country, for an economy, right? So there's always this perception of startups or investing in startups being something that is of a high risk in nature. So that actually drives the, so to say, the aversion from the investors to say that, maybe I wait until they have actually grown to produce their revenue or the profit, then only I'll come in to invest. by then, I mean, by that time, the startups will not be there anymore, right? But try to look at it in a different way. So a typical company, a Senior Berhad or an MNC, the way they look at innovation, the way they do their innovation is actually would cost a lot higher compared to the cost for a startup to do their innovation work. I mean, think about it, right? So the actual the cost of failure for a startup is actually a lot lower. So if you think like in a typical company, right? If you want to do something innovative, you want to change your product, you want to do something different, right? The amount of man hours that will be committed to all kinds of committees, the budgets, the approvals, all those things, all the red tape that you have to go through just to do something. Compare that to a startup. All you need is just a founder and some of his friends, some equipment, a garage, that's it. So if it fails, doesn't matter, but how much would it cost? Okay. So I think big companies should realize this and maybe even leverage on startups actually to drive innovation. So that's the way I see that actually startups play a very key role in driving innovation in an economy.
Prof. Jet. So from Cradle standpoint, and I believe also from sociology and innovation, startup plays an important role with that innovation. What about from your side? How do you address, how do you leverage innovation to create economic stability and competitiveness?
Thanks. I think, again, now go back to our strategy and our blueprint. Our post-COVID development strategy basically is driven by data and innovation. In other words, it's a knowledge-based economy that's being to moving away from a resource-based economy to sustainable technology-driven economy. And that's where innovation plays an important role. But when I look at innovation itself, I look at value add. So what sort of innovation should I be involving? Is it inward or outward? When I look at the business model, innovative business models that we come up with, because digitization brings about new business models. There's very outward-looking and very strategic, because this is going to be a new revenue model for you. So if I can start getting to those sort of innovations, it's going to have an economic impact. The other thing what I can look into is a process innovation, which is very internal. If I start looking at process innovation, then what I will do is to increase efficiency and productivity, things like that. So there are different areas between to and also product innovation, which is both the outward and process driven. So to me, without innovation, we won't get productivity that we want to. We won't get the efficiency that we are driving for, and we also won't get the competitiveness and the cost effectiveness. So to me, going forward, our whole agenda for predictability is based on innovation and that. So it says we can't run away. We need more startups, but the challenge is have you got enough people to be starting companies? In Sarawak, I look at we got 2.8 million people, and there are a lot of challenges. So we have to look into policies. How do you attract speed-ins? Because if I look at Singapore, if I look at Australia, I look at European countries, look at Estonia, 1.5 million people, but the innovation agenda there is so rife, so high. And what they have done, they spend a lot of time on speed-ins, the nomads program, the e-residency programs. So I think those are sort of things that we have to really push our agenda so that we are able to grow the economy.
So you mentioned just now, Prof, on valuing the upward digitalization. So I just want to ask Sudarnoto, what are SDEC's thoughts on that? Because I believe you are one of the champions with regards to that in Sarawak.
Okay, startup innovation for me, very crucial when it comes to bringing societal change and especially in our economic growth. I think I echo what Norman was saying about big companies. Big companies all need to innovate all the time, right? But innovation comes at a cost, and And this is where startup can play the big role, because startup risk is lower comparatively, right? They can fail anytime. They have less shareholder to please, right? Because big company normally have their public shareholders that please. That's the biggest issue there. But when it comes to startup, there are less people. So that play a very, very important role in this ecosystem in terms of innovation. And I totally agree with Prof. Jack. We cannot just purely, in terms of Sarawak, we cannot just purely depend on our internal talent. We have to bring in talent. We have to bring in other people who will be part of this journey as well. And I totally echo Prof. Jack with our ambitious PCDS 2030. If you look at what our premier announces on the new economy, we need startups to be able to support this economy. Right. This will not happen overnight. I totally agree with this. But at the end of the day, we need people to be starting involved in this. And nothing better than being a startup. And this is where the anchor company that is focusing on this economy itself can help these startups to grow as well surrounding this new economy. So this is one of the things that I felt that startup can play a big role in this new economy. Not just purely focusing on digital, but they also focus on hydrogen economy, circular economy, and so forth. And on chipping in, I would just like to use that, yes, I totally agree with the project. We need to bring in talents, right? So this is where, as far as SDEC is concerned, we are working closely with MDEC, how we can bring in the extension of the Rantau, for example, the digital moment initiative to Sarawak. And of course, because Sarawak has very unique, we have our own immigration rule. So that's the reason why we have to come up with a DE Rantau Plus. It's a plus version 2, because to accommodate the regulation in Sarawak. So these are some of the initiatives that is ongoing as far as SDEC is concerned.
On the topic of talent, so you mentioned talent. I believe that's one of the challenges in regards to the ecosystem of Sarawak. Apart from that, are there any other challenges on the work to encourage more innovation? Cik Sudarnoto.
Apart from that, I think it's basically when it comes to talents, yes, I think it's also mentors, right? Access to mentors. I think this is one of the areas that we need to work with external mentors as well. How we can create more. We are working with a company called Future Lab, where we create mentoring program with that, so that this mentor who are in the domain, in their respective domain, can actually advise startups how to go about moving forward with their ideation. These are some of the things. So I think access to mentor will be one thing. Finding the right mentor for the business is also very important as well, to match them. And I think access to funding, especially from private sectors, will also be a key critical areas, because you cannot be just purely depending on the government for funding. We must make sure that the private sector also play an active role in the growth of these startups as well. That is the reason why SDEC has been aggressively promoting the MBAN, the Angel Network in Sarawak. We have created the Sarawak chapter, as you know, right? And so that private sector can play the role, and at the same time enjoy tax incentive, for example, right? These are the few things that we are trying to resolve the issues in our what I call startup ecosystem. Yeah?
I think adding on to that, funding, I believe, is very important, especially when you want to accelerate high potential innovation. Because I'm a strong believer that you can't be funding everything, but you fund the gold medalists, right? The people who are going to really in order to change. So that sort of funding got to be provided, and again, agree with what Matthieu said. It can't be government putting everything, and a lot of countries seem find that the public-private partnership is a private sector puts in a lot of funding to accelerate that. The other area is the collaboration and cooperation. Because when you set up an ecosystem for innovation, there are a number of players who work together. And sometimes what happens, they start working in silos. And that does not support that ecosystem, that culture of collaboration. And I think that has to be very carefully selected what the ecosystem players are. And I think the most important, I believe, to get high quality innovation going on startups is your research and development. Because especially if you look at the technology area like green energy, like circular economy, like digital, then research and innovation plays a key role. And when I gave you an example of Israel area, such a small country, largest number of research centers up there, and this was feeding in. And some of the things they have done, is amazing. And it's all through research and development. The new ideas came up and they commercialized it. So we have to make sure that our research and development ecosystem is strong and supported. And that way the outcomes of that can be directly related to or can feed into new startups and innovation.
Just to add on one of the points that Prof Jet was mentioning, right? I mean, it's important. I mean, as a startup in Malaysia, I'm sure you've heard of all the different kinds of agencies, that do every different things. Some go into equity investments, some give debt ventures, some give grants, some give this at the federal and even at the state level. So it tend to get a bit confusing for a startup. So this is one of the key things that MYStartup is trying to address. So to actually to help guide the Malaysian startups navigate through the ecosystem. So what it does is it brings together all the available resources that we have in the country, all the different agencies, and between us agencies as well. I mean, we do have to identify each of our strengths and work together, find synergies which is ultimately to serve the ecosystem, and in the end drive up the country's economic development. So this.
Can I just add one more point? When we look at high-tech innovation, in particular medtech, because with pandemic, there's a lot of really high demand or high valued innovations taking place in that. But if you look at the regulatory framework for medtech devices and that, it's so stringent that it takes years to get it accepted, right? So I think there's something that has to be looked into, because we can't be following the 1980s rules and regulations and operating in the 21st century. So that is very important as far as I see it. And of course the infrastructure and what you just mentioned about the ecosystem partners coming together, that has to be linked as well.
Okay, I think was the challenges are talent, working in silos, mentors, agencies working together, and funding, private funding. So on the issue of private funding and moving away from government direct support to the startups and innovators, once we do that, how do we do that actually? How do we wean off these startups from government direct funding? So how do we ensure that they will still continue with their projects, their startups, despite whilst also reducing government direct assistance? Prof Jack?
I think when I look at the startup development, it's not only funding, it's the entire ecosystem you have to look into. So like infrastructure, training, mentoring, all that, which is not direct funding, it's indirect funding. And a lot of those things are available either through government or through universities, through private sector. So I think, to me, I think it's the whole ecosystem we're looking to. And is government not giving money for startups, that doesn't mean that they stop, right? It has to keep on going, and there's a lot of private sector and investors that will do that. But the important thing is that when I look at the startups, it's not when they got a product ready, because then there are investors already there, because they're de-risked in a way. It's a very early stage, where the real issue is. And what we are doing in Sarawak, and I think Malaysia also doing, we're looking at how do we fund the startups at a very early stage. Not all startups, we got to be very selective. The startup that we see, there's a value in supporting them, and they'll create something that's going to have economic, social, and environmental impact. So we're looking into how do we fund them. In fact, we are putting a recommendation that some funding through government and private sector corporation funding should be set up that can be given out to the startups in a very early stage, so that at least we are able to de-risk them in the very stage. Because remember, they are operating from a switched-in budget. Now they have to leave as well, and somehow it's to be supported.
Interesting, you mentioned assisting early stage startup. I just want to add a plugin for the Malaysia Startup Ecosystem Roadmap under MYStartup. That's one of the interventions that we are looking at. We want to increase more. We want to encourage more government funding at the early stage. It's great that Sarawak is also adapting that stance. With Sudarnoto, what's your thoughts on ensuring startups still innovate and create without direct funding?
I think that's why I say, as mentioned by Prof just now, I think you cannot be looking at funding just purely in McDonald's sense. You have to look at what are the facilities provided by the government as well, right? Like the likes of Digital Village, for that matter. Because you wouldn't get the price of renting a room in Digital Village as you compared if you would take renting a room there outside. So these are some of the indirect, indirect assistance from the government. We have to look in that manner as well. So some of the assistance that we're giving to startup are not in form of the in the monetary terms. It comes in terms of development programs, for example, like in some of the innovation hub, even in Tegas or even in SDEC ramp-ups, or even the private sector ramps up, we have the pre-accelerator programs, right? So this is also meant for startups. Then once some of the good ones, then we bring to the accelerate program, which will feel, of course, the government will still have to be involved to a certain extent. Then after that, then the good ones, of course, become by private sectors. So that is the idea of how Sarawak ecosystem is striking, where we focus a lot on the early stage as what we know that basically private sector are very reluctant to move at the early stage growth of a startup. That's where the government will come in. But eventually, when they are ready, that's the private sector take it out for the future growth.
Actually, I would like to echo on what Mr. Sudarnoto, add on to what Mr. Sudarnoto was mentioning. Government plays that role of actually venturing into new areas, high-risk areas, to give an example to the industries, the companies out there that what is possible. Right? So investing in early stage startups, the value that can be created from that, and then the private sector will be more convinced to enter into this area and to invest more, actually. So it's like government paving the way towards this. So under what MYStartup initiative has done previously, what we can see, so there's this Hackathon programs, right? So it started with a government-led hackathon. So what has grown from there is actually a lot more private corporate companies are actually entering into this and seeing the value of actually leveraging on startups to come up with solutions to their problem statements. So we've seen the likes of we've seen the likes of big companies like RHB, the banks, Petronas, Axiata, DNB. Okay, so actually, I think it is really picking up a lot of pace at the moment, and I think we, as the government, will need to continue to drive this actually to keep the interest going.
No, just read on to what you said. In Australia, because I'm Australian, the National Research and Innovation Policy basically is focuses on bringing the researcher and the businesses together. They don't provide funding, but they bring those two together because they know innovation startups spins out from the research. And if they can link it up with the business, then they take it up over the stage. So I think something like that we have to start looking into. How do you better do that. And in Sarawak, again, I'll give you an example. In our strategy and our policies, we got what we call a linkage grant scheme. The industrial sector or the businesses, they see if there's a challenge in certain area, then they engage with the researchers and fund the researchers to come up with a solution, and then they commercialize it. Or they let them spin out as a company. So I think we have to start looking at a more innovative way in funding our startups or ideas and bringing them to life. But that's Australian national agenda.
Sudarnoto would add.
It's again. That's why I say it's a model of funding the solution provider rather than the end users. So this is one way of looking at it. I totally agree with Project. I think linking the solutions, especially the research in the universities. There's a lot of research being done at the universities level as well. But how we can actually make simultaneously, one, we can speed up the company to form startups as well, because they can be a startup as well. Or basically linking the university solution together to the industry, because it's easy to adopt the solution if it's solving certain industry problem statements. And for that industry to acquire that technology or that solution, it will be much easier, because for them, they just look at that as a project rather than funding a startup, because project that resolve the internal issues, Yeah, that's one way of looking at it.
Just to give you an example, just to give an example, again from Australia, I don't know how many of you know CSIRO, that's the chief, the Commonwealth research body. And that works with all the universities, 38 universities in Australia. And what they do is basically they empower the researchers to come up with future solutions. And give you some examples what came out of that particular team. Wi-Fi that we use every day now is an invention from these particular researchers, and today's a major IP. Plastic notes that we use all over the place now is again an invention of a similar sort of thing. Researchers working with the Commonwealth and the industry and coming out and then spinning out as a company. And they are multi-billion dollar companies now. So I think if you link up the researchers with the corporations and the government through a partnership and see where the government's direction is. And in particular, if I look at with the climate change, green energy, circular economy, those are the directions. Then if you can empower the researchers with the corporations, then I think that's where the greatest impact will be. And then funding becomes, secondary issue, because everybody is going to look at the outcome that they're looking to.
Yes.
Right. Thanks.
Okay, just to some follow-up question on that, Prof. The issue, I've been about similar initiatives locally. Yeah. How do you get, how did the Australian get the corporates to be on board? So that's one of the key challenge for such initiatives. So how did they do it in Australia?
What we did in Australia is what we said, we set up a cooperative research centers, not research centers just in the university. So it's a partnership model. So the corporations, before if you know, most of the bigger companies, they used to do research themselves. But it's very high risk business. Because when you're doing something new research that you don't know it isn't be an outcome that you're looking at. So they spend them billions and billions. At the same time, they have to employ very highly qualified people to do research. Again, it's a very high risk. So what government did is that, no, this is where the universities are. They take the risk. This is where they attribute this research. And they fund the investors for that. So that was the motivation for the corporations to say, okay, I'm going to offer my research to these universities. And the federal government, basically the state government, they fund the research. So they're de-risking themselves. But they fund it as well because a particular research they're interested in. So there's funding levels in that way. And then they get a much better outcome. So like when I look at cooperative research center researchers or research funding, it will be about $500, $600 million. As against a private industry being funded, it will be about $2 million out. And these will be big ticket items, like you look at the transport system. How do you address the transport system? You look at quantum computing, how do you address that? So these are the big ticket items research. And what happens is suddenly you don't have 10 PhD students, you get 1,000 PhD students working on that. So there's a critical mass, and you get a far better outcome. And what happens, especially in Sarawak when I was working there might be 200 research students working together. Out of that, 3 or 4 will be working on a very similar topic, the spin of our company. And there's a very high end is. And I think that's the model we're trying to aid up here, a cooperative research centers, which is a partnership between universities and corporations. And then solving real problems that's based on in our and
What about the IP, Prof? The research done under that cooperative, how do you divide the IP?
Everybody talks about IP, right? IP is a killer. You start thinking so much about what IP you don't get enough though. See, once the outcome is there, once it's of quality, it'll make millions turn well. Everybody shares. So as long as it's a cooperative and collaborative IP policy, everybody wins. So I think what we call back home, we call it easy access IP, we call it. And if I think that a researcher think that I put an IP, if you don't give it out, they die out. It's a technology-driven IP, very fast-ending. So let it make it available to the users, current users. They'll come up with something new. They'll exploit it, and you need to return off. So what we call an easy access IP policy.
Interesting, Prof. The reason for so many follow-up questions is something near and dear to me. It's one of the things that I have to deal with the business that I still got map as well. Is to encourage the commercialization of IPs. Understand? You can't be too fixated on IPs and more to self-harm. So thank you for the insight, Prof.
So balance it up, right? There might be some very high tech, like biotech policies, IPs that you have to protect because, but there's others, is it really need to protect it? Make it available and get a return, right? Make a bigger impact in the community effort.